InSpirit is probably the only place that I can think of that you can hear KRS-One one week, you can hear Billy Joel the next, and you can hear somebody else on a different week, and it's all good. Because we recognize that when you know truth and when you're experiencing truth, you're not necessarily worried about the form of how it looks, but you know truth when you hear it, you know truth when you see it, and you know truth when you experience it. And I happen to really like this song for a number of reasons. Number one, it really embodies the message that I have to deliver today that Spirit has given to me. But it's got a special meaning for me, because this very song was sung and performed more than 35 years ago at my wedding with Reverend Sharon and me. This song was a tribute to our relationship because she was concerned about being with someone who would not try to make her be someone that she was not. She did not see herself as a traditional housewife. You know, back in those days, that was kind of toward the tail end of when you had a single earner household. So she wanted to be able to be her own person, to get out and work and to have a career if she wanted it, and not be defined by her gender, but be defined by the content of who she was and who she still is. So I was willing to let her be who she was because I loved that powerful, that beautiful, that wonderful individual that she was, and there was nothing about it that I thought that needed to be changed. Now this song reminds us, it's talking about loving someone else just the way that they are, but really we can turn that around and say that that is life talking to us. That life loves us just the way that we are, that there's nothing special that we have to be. We can simply be ourselves and be loved. And that goes to the heart of the message that we have today. I mentioned about Reverend Sharon. I think she's pretty much always known who she is, what her values are, and who she wants to be. And that has evolved over time in terms of the way that she chooses to show up and manifest herself. But she's always known what a spiritual being that she is. And I think many of us have not been quite so fortunate. At 56 years of age, I'm still struggling a bit to try to find who the authentic me is, who the real Terry is, to give the authentic Terry permission to stand up, to show up, and to talk and speak for me. So my lesson today is going to be talking about this, will the real you please stand up? For you to stand up and tell the truth about who you are, why you're here, and what you've come here to do. But first I'd like to take a look at our scripture, which comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 11 through 16. And if you have your Bibles, I invite you to open up and follow along with me. I'll be reading from the Lambda translation, so if you have the King James, the New Standard Revised Version, the New International Version, it may read a little bit differently, but the gist is going to be the same. Again, that's 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 11 through 16. And it's going to kind of lay the groundwork for what we want to talk about today. It reads, "For what man knows the mind of man, save the spirit of man which is within him? Even so, no one knows the mind of God except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit that is from God, that we may understand the gifts that we are given by God. For the things which we discuss are not dependent upon the knowledge of words and man's wisdom, but on the teachings of the Spirit, thus explaining spiritual things to the spiritually minded. For the material man rejects spiritual things. They are foolishness to him. Neither can he know them, because they are all spiritually discerned. But the spiritual man discerns everything, yet no man can discern him. For who knows the mind of the Lord that he may teach it? But we have the mind of Christ." Now, this is the writing of the Apostle Paul, and Paul can be a bit wordy and can be a little bit dense to understand. So we're going to cover some of these themes with our lesson today. But first, I'm going to start out by asking all of you, Whether you remember a show that came on, for some of us it's going to be many years ago, called To Tell the Truth. How many people remember that show? Well, if you remember that show, it consisted of a panelist of probably 4 or 5 celebrities whose job it was to determine which of 3 candidates were telling the truth and who was the real person. Each of those people would all claim to be the same person. For example, if they were going to say they were me, one would stand up and say, "My name is Terry Thompson, and I am a minister." The second one would stand up and say, "I am Terry Thompson, and I am a minister." And then the third one would do the same. So the panelists would ask a bunch of questions of each of them to try to determine which of them is the true Terry Thompson. Now, the thing that was special about the show is that the imposters could lie. And they could lie as much as they wanted to in order to deceive the panelist. But the real person, that person had to tell the truth, regardless of what question was asked. The only question that couldn't be asked is, are you the real whoever the person was? So the panelists would go through this whole procedure, and at the end of it, they would each cast a vote to see which they thought was the actual person. And the imposters would win prize money by being able to deceive the panelists. And at the end, the host would say, "Will the real whoever please stand up?" And there'd be a little bit of up and down. Some would start to stand up and they'd sit back down. The next one would stand up and sit back down, and they'd go on like this for a few minutes. And eventually, the real person would stand up, and people would see whether they were right or whether they were wrong. Well, you know, life is like that. Life is like that for us, accepting that we are the panelists, we are the imposters, and we are also the authentic person. Now you may say, "Reverend Terry, how can that be? How can I be all these different people at one time?" Well, we need to understand that when we are experiencing life, life is constantly asking us questions. Who are you? How do you plan to show up? Do you believe in yourself? What do you believe about yourself? And most of all, prove it. Prove it not by the words that come out of your mouths, but by the actions that you perform. So sometimes we're courageous enough to let the authentic us stand up and speak for us. But very often, because of our fears, our doubts, our worries, our sense of inadequacy, we let the imposter stand up. We let doubt talk for us when somebody comes to ask us, "What are you here for?" We'll lie and say we don't know. "Why are you here?" "I don't know." Or sometimes we'll say, "I do know, but I really can't do it because my wife won't let me," or "my spouse won't let me," or "I've got children and responsibilities, so I can't step up and be who I really want to be." We tell these deceptions so that we don't make ourselves look bad, but in the end, we're not fooling anybody but ourselves. It takes faith, it takes courage for us to stand up and for us to express the authentic selves that we truly are. The question is, who is this authentic self? Who is the authentic self that I'm talking about that we want to allow to stand up and to talk for us? So let's take a look at that, and I'd like to, first of all, make sure that we have some working definitions so that we're all on the same page. First of all, when we talk about the word authentic, it means something that's real. And when we talk about our authentic selves, we're talking about being true to who we are, to our personality, to our spirit, and to our character. One of the components of true authenticity is integrity, or one of the byproducts from being authentic. When we're authentic, we live a life of integrity. And integrity is defined as being whole and complete, with having a firm adherence to a code of moral or artistic values. The thing is that when we live an authentic life, we live a life of integrity. And that when we live a life of integrity, we live a life of wholeness and completeness. And when we live a life of wholeness and completeness, we live a life of limitlessness. And for those of you who were here last month, when I talked about limitless thinking and limitless living, you know that that means thinking outside the box, right? Thank you. I just wanted to see if y'all remember, because there is no box. There is no box, and we sometimes will attempt to place a box around ourselves when we live out of the imposter and let the imposter speak for us. So now, just who is this imposter that I'm talking about, and who is the authentic self? The imposter is that part of us that prevents us from expressing the Christ, the God that dwells in us, from expressing the true divine beings that we are. So it's our doubts, it's our fears, it's our worries, it's that conditioning that we may have gotten from mama and daddy, from our friends and from the environment all around us that keeps us from being everything that we can and from living a limitless life. The authentic self, on the other hand, is the spiritual man that Paul talks about. The authentic part of us is the Christ consciousness, the I am that lives within us, that wants to express through us and as us. The reason that we let the imposter come up to answer life's questions for us is because either we don't believe in ourselves, or more importantly, we don't believe in the God that dwells in us, and we think that that God is going to let us down and not have our backs. So now, what causes us to let this imposter come forward? The thing is that we go through life, and we have different experiences that tell us that we're inadequate, that we're not good enough, that tell us that somehow we're not enough. When you're growing up, your parents may have said to you, "Oh, why'd you do such a stupid thing? You just can't do anything right." And we absorb that and make that a part of who we are. We may have had some experience with someone that we thought that we were in love with, and that person rejected us, and we said to ourselves, "I'm not lovable. Nobody's going to love me, so I have to act out." Or we may have been in school and done poorly on a test, or it was time for us to stand up, and we weren't quite prepared, and we got a little bit flustered, and people laughed at us. And so we decided that we couldn't speak in front of audiences. So we have all these different things that have happened to us, regardless of what they are, whether they've been things that happened to us innocently, or sometimes because we've been in abusive relationships, and we carry these with us through our lives. And for some of us, we're still dealing with them, regardless of whether we're in our 20s, our 30s, our 40s, our 50s, and sometimes even our 60s and our 70s. We're still dealing with these hurts. So what do? Well, nobody wants to be hurt. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. So we send the imposter when life presents us with those questions about how we're going to respond. We send the imposter and let the imposter lie and deceive everyone to make them think that we've got it all together when we don't, because we have these feelings that we don't want to experience. But in Spirit Family, Reverend Terry is going to tell you something. You need to let yourself experience those feelings and to own them, because those feelings are a part of who you are, and they're telling you something about what you need for your growth. You see, when we experience these issues, what life is telling us is, here is an opportunity for you to grow. Here is an opportunity for you to stand up and let the authentic you shine forth. Here is an opportunity for you to express the Christ. But it's up to you to let the right one of you answer. So now I've told you what the authentic self is. Let me tell you what the authentic self is not. I mentioned to you about your feelings, and your feelings are valid, you need to own them, but you are not your feelings. You are not your race, you are not your gender, you are not your sexual orientation. You're not your job, you're not a mama, you're not a daddy. These are simply roles or a way that we have come into this earthly plane to express ourselves, to express the true spiritual beings that we are. But we forget who we are because who we are is so powerful that it scares us. Who we are is so powerful that if we were to let the true us come forward, we'd have to be responsible for what happens in our lives. And most of us don't want that responsibility, do we? It's much easier to blame somebody else when things don't go right. Isn't it easy to say that the white man won't let me do what I want to do? Isn't it easy to say, you know, I'm black, and black means I'm poor, I'm disadvantaged, I'm uneducated? In Spirit family, be careful what you claim. Because if you claim that the universe is going to continue to give back to you, you have shown up to express as whatever it is that you are, but that is not who you are. And for you to let that be the limiting force in your life, for you to let that be the reason why you don't do things that you need to do, is really blasphemy against the Holy Spirit that lives in you. You are a spiritual being made in the image and likeness of God, period. That is your authentic you, and that is the you that you want to express through you and as you, regardless of how else it is that you come into this life to show up. That means whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're orange, whether you're green, you have a different way of expressing yourself, but it's that same spiritual energy that's in each and every one of us. No one is any better than the other one is. It's only how we choose to use that opportunity to express the Christ within us that makes a difference. And if you own who you are, you own the feelings that you have, you can give yourself permission for you to express whatever way you need to express in this life. And it does not have to be out of anger, it does not have to be out of fear, but rather it can be out of love and out of joy and out of passion for the purpose that you came here to serve. So when people ask you who you really are, you may respond, I'm Reverend Terry, but you need to know for yourself, Reverend Terry is a spiritual being. I am a spiritual being, and I am limitless. So let's all say together, I am a spiritual being. I am limitless because God is limitless. I am a spiritual being. I am limitless because God is limitless. So in Spirit family, I'm going to ask you some things about what you believe. Do you believe that money is the root of all evil? It's in the Bible, isn't it? Well, that's just dropping off a little part of it, but it does say that the love of money is the root of all evil. But the Bible also says that money answers all things. So which do you believe? Do you mean that being black means poor, and that being black means uneducated and disadvantaged? Or do you believe to remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the power to get wealth? Do you believe that you are a miserable sinner, shaped in sin and born in iniquity? Or do you believe that you are a spiritual being, made in the image and according to the likeness of God? Do you believe when challenges happen in your life that God is punishing you? Or do you believe that life is handing you an opportunity for you to grow and to express your divine true self? Do you believe that you are defined by your circumstances, by your past and what people will allow you to do? Or do you believe that you are limitless because you are made in the image and likeness of God, and God is limitless? So in Spirit family, as we go through life, trying to find the authentic self, doing our search, we have these different questions that life presents to us. It asks us, do you know who you are? And do you know what your purpose is? Because when we embrace our purpose, Spirit will find a way to give us everything it is that we need. We don't need to make the excuses, oh, I don't have the money, or so-and-so won't let me do it. We don't need to say, I don't have the education, because once you have made up your mind to be in alignment with Spirit, when your will is aligned with divine will, circumstances will change because you've changed, and everything that you need will show up for you. Life is also going to ask you, do you love yourself? And it's going to say, prove it. When I send that person around to cuss you and to treat you badly, how are you going to react? Are you going to take it, or are you going to say, this has nothing to do with me? When you're with that abusive spouse or family member, are you going to stay around them, or are you going to bless them and step away from them? Life is going to test you because we ask for those tests so that we can bring the Christ forward. and express the Christ in us. It's going to ask you how it is that you're showing up. Do you believe in yourself? Do you believe in the world around you, and do you believe in God? Or are you afraid and doubtful about everything? Do you believe that circumstances run your life and that circumstances control you? Life is going to ask you what it is that you fear, and it's going to constantly bring those fears up into your face. It's going to ask you, are you afraid to stand up and be you? Are you afraid to start that business? Are you afraid to write that book? You don't really want to be the father that you're supposed to be because people tell you that a black man can't raise children properly. Black men are supposed to be off in the street making babies, not raising them. A black man is supposed to be in jail, not raising kids, not being a good husband, not being a good family member, not being a vital part of the community. Life is going to ask you, what is it you're afraid of? And when it asks, what are you going to do? Are you going to stand up and be who you are? Are you going to be the expression that you were put here to be? When life asks you about your sexual orientation, are you going to lie and stay in the closet, or are you going to come out? These are all questions that we have to ask ourselves. And it doesn't mean that you have to be all up anybody's face with anything. It means that you own who you are. You don't deny it. You don't have to be in anybody's face trying to make them think, oh, I'm such and such a way, so you have to accept me. No. You love yourself and you carry yourself and you love the people around you. That's what the Christ in you does. The rest of it will fall into place. So in Spirit family, life is asking you who you are, who the real you is. And at some point, you're going to get to the point that you get tired of all the problems that come up in your life. You're going to get tired of the challenges, and you're going to say to yourself, will the real me please stand up? So what I'd like for you to do today is I'd like for you all to stand up and for you to acknowledge yourself and say your name, Terry. The real me, I welcome the real me to stand up now. Say your name, Terry. I welcome the real me to stand up now. Terry, I allow the real me to stand up now. Terry, I allow the real me to stand up now. And give yourselves a hand. And so I'd like to close with a piece of poetry that all of you should be very familiar with. It's called Our Greatest Fear. And I think it kind of sums up what it is that we want to get from this lesson today about the powerful individuals that we are. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us most. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Each and every one of you is a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to manifest the glory of the God that is within us. It's not just in some of us. It's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. In Spirit family, liberate yourself and liberate the world. Stand up and be the person that you were meant to be. I love each and every one of you. Peace and blessings.